Hey folks, so we're on the deck of the common house today, which we're calling the roost here. And it is time. We are going to plant up our Corten steel planters, which we had last year. If you recall, we planted them up with lilies and some pennisetum, some grasses as well. So most of the stuff that I usually plant in are perennial, so I move them out. But we had a situation with the lilies that we have a lily leaf beetle, which is an invasive insect that just basically decimates the lilies. Surprisingly, this year it wasn't that bad. Down in the meadow house, I had planted some lilies and they came up in full force this year. But I had to go out there with sharp sprays of the hose or crushing some of the lily leaf beetles in order to have my lilies. So it wasn't necessarily like a really good option to have for a statement piece of a planter that basically opens up the house. So Sonder didn't finish the deck completely, but the main deck is in. He still has to finish the lower deck and some of the stairways and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's finished. And we haven't only been using it, we've had some guests here that have been using the deck, and I also have, you might see some chipmunks and squirrels and birds running around on the deck behind me. Too bad you can't see in front of me because I do have a little plate of food out there for them, but I am sure as soon as I plant this, there'll be some sunflower seeds planted in here by our chipmunks, but that's just how it goes. Now, as I mentioned, these are Corten steel metal planters, and we didn't want to put the metal directly on the deck because we didn't know how the deck would interact with the metal. So I bought these really cool pot feet, and I'm doing this also down at the meadow house too, and you probably can't see, but this is just a really nice blackened teak wood. So we trialed it on some of the boards and it seems to be fine. So this basically just lifts the pot up from the deck. And you could put some of those felted pads beneath this, but we felt like we didn't need to. I'm not going to be moving these planters very much. And I like to plant perennials in here, and if I get sick of the perennials, I could always move them out into the landscape. So I'll show you what I have. And I have in the past wanted to plant a willow in here. I've wanted to plant just like one big showy grass. And this year I'm kind of feeling something a little different. I want something that complements all the gardens that you see behind me, which is like our pollinator garden. Our shrubbery has really taken off. Our herb garden is on fleek now. So there's quite a lot going on. So I have some older potting medium in here, which I think is totally fine. And I'm going to top it off with Espoma organic potting mix simply in here. I want to put a lot of plants in here, as you'll find out. So one of the ones that I have kind of looks like a little bit of a shaggy dog. Looks like it got clipped here by somebody or something. But this is the Liatris. This is Liatris spicata, and it's a cultivar named Cobold. And this is one of the cultivars of Liatris that I have growing in the pollinator garden. Liatris has become quickly and easily one of my top 3 favorite plants in the garden, and I'm growing all different types of species. Our endangered species, which is Liatris, and it's a Newlandii, which is this type of variation. So I have a number of those that I've planted down in the meadow house and also here in the pollinator garden. Pycnostachya, the really tall one, and I also have the true Liatris spicata, which is much taller. The Cobold is a more compact cultivated variety, so 2 to 3 feet max. I also think the leaves look a bit more like shaggier. It looks like a shaggy dog a bit. You have other ones that are a bit closer to the stem of the plant, but you'll see here that it is about to have this beautiful fireworks display, and a lot of the Liatris has these spidery leg firework displays as florets, and they bloom from the top down typically. I mean, there might be some Liatris that bloom from the bottom up, but I think most of them bloom from the top down. And the butterflies bees, hummingbirds, they absolutely adore these plants. And since I have a lot behind me, I'm going to plant this one here. And this will kind of be the main centerpiece, although I have other plants that are larger that I want to plant in. And yeah, it looks like there's some pieces that are broken, and I might cut those off, or I might like just let them stay as is. All right, so that's going to be our centerpiece. The next one I have, and I've talked about this before because in the episode where I'm planting tropical bulbs, and this is one that has yet to flower, and this is a crocosmia, and these are absolutely stunning. If you recall the ones that I have, Lucifer, I think this is the Lucifer one. It gets a tall flower spike that comes out in like a sea-like fashion, and it has these really beautiful bright red flowers. Again, hummingbird magnet. We have a lot of hummingbirds that are around here. I have a hummingbird feeder, but they also frequent the flowers, hence the pollinator garden. The penstemons right now are the ones that they're visiting a lot of. So I figured if this one, you have this purplish red fireworks display in the front, and then maybe the crocosmia coming out in the back. So that's what I was envisioning there. All right, next on my list, and I had gotten an orange one of these with the intention of planting it in the planters, but you know, some things just take other precedence when you're working on the homestead. I've been working a lot on the meadow house backyard garden, which I'm eager to show you, but for right now, we're gonna focus on this. There's a lot that's happened there, but my arms are sore from hoofing all that soil. Now this is a Nymphophia, and again, kind of like a different, it looks like a fire torch, but they have all different colors. You normally would see like oranges and reds, kind of fire engine oranges and reds with maybe little yellow tips. Definitely feels much more tropical. It looks like a flower you'd maybe see on like an agave or something. Very unusual. This one happens to have a white flower with like little yellow throats. And I got this from Bluestone Perennials. You'll see that the roots look really good and they're just coming out of the coconut pots. You could just plant this pot right in there, which is what I like about Bluestone, because there's a little less waste when you're growing in a cocoa fiber pot. But if you don't plant them right away, they tend to basically dry out really quickly. So you should get them planted in or have some kind of regime to water them. So this one will come out with a big spire, kind of like the liatris. So I like the fact that there is that symmetry in there. Like you want to have all different types of flower heads for different types of pollinators, or butterflies, not necessarily the best pollinators in the world, but they like to nectar and they like to sit on those kind of chrysanthemum heads, the daisy heads. So they'll just like perch there. And it's always important if you're doing like a pollinator garden, no matter how small, even if it's this, a planter pot outside of your door, you want to have that diversity if you're trying to attract specific pollinators, which I think we'll probably do here. Next one on my list is Asclepias tuberosa, and this one is a cultivated variety called Hello Yellow. So typically Asclepias tuberosa is orange. It has orange flowers, and I didn't really want to go the orange route here. We have the purples, we have the reds. I wanted to go purple, reds, yellows is always a good win, and the whites are a bit more neutral. So this one has, similarly to the other milkweeds, Asclepias, if you're not familiar, are the milkweeds. And when you think of milkweeds, I think it's been ingrained in many of us to think about monarchs, because Asclepias is the host plant for our monarchs. We don't think about what other plants are host plants for our other butterflies, because there's other butterflies other than monarchs, believe it or not. But Asclepias is the one for monarchs, but a lot of other insects rely on Asclepias. There's a lot of synergies with Asclepias with other insects as well. But I wanted to try this one. It's also pretty drought tolerant as well. So this is obviously sitting out in the sun. It's the morning, but I'm already starting to feel the heat here. So that's something important to note. So this one I could probably put here in the front, And, you know, I have this, they always say, hey, get the thriller, the filler, and the spiller that kind of spills over the edge. And that's a really nice way to make a basket. Sometimes I just like to put whatever I want to put in here. So I don't always follow those rules. This one you may have seen from one of my other planters down in the meadow house, and it's become a fast favorite of mine. I am starting to plant it in the landscape as well. This is a really drought tolerant Solidago. Well, it's not a Solidago, it's a goldenrod. It's in the Solidago family, and this is called Bigloia natalii. And this would be a great rock garden plant, for instance. So if you have a really dry xeriscape, then this would be perfect. I love how grass-leaved and frilly it is. It reminds me a bit of the liatris in that kind of capacity. So you see I have a lot of grassy-like leaves in here, and it may not look like, you know, much to somebody, especially if you're somebody who likes to put annual plants into a planter. They look like big and bodacious and beautiful and colorful, and they are in full flower all the time. This, you have to be a little bit more patient. When you're planting perennials, in some cases, you have to be a little bit more patient because they're not always in flower, but there's always something kind of like banging off here. And so I think, you know, we're in July right now, and I think some of these things will starting to flower in like late July, mid to late July, and in through like November essentially. So, so I'm going to try to fit this one in here. And this was grown by Rare Roots, which I mentioned them several times on this channel, a small grower out of Virginia, and I really love their plants. They always come in, you know, nearly perfect, so I'm always pleased with that. Now I might have room for 2 of these, actually, and luckily I do have 2. I have this creeping Jenny. I think it's also called moneywort, and these are really common in hanging baskets or in planters. Lysimachia, I'm not sure, so I have some of our native Lysimachia that's growing in the pollinator garden, because our native Lysimachia, I'm not sure about the non-native Lysimachias, but the ones that are native to New York here are very important for their resins for our specialist bees. And I have a whole episode on attracting specialist bees, specialist pollinators, and what plants to plant for that. And this one gets yellow flowers and has this kind of pop of chartreusey green color on the leaves. And I like how it hangs over. I don't know how these are going to react up against like hot metal. So this is going to be something that I'm going to try. People will plant this as a alternative ground cover as well. But I think I'm just going to hang this over like that. And maybe one on this side as well, just to keep some symmetry. I have yet another plant. It's surprising how much I could actually fit in here. Now, a lot of these plants will have a tendency to grow out if you keep them year over year. You might not want to plant this thickly, but that's one of the things, like in my pollinator garden, I can't believe how much it's really filled out. Some plants I'm going to probably start taking out and putting in the meadow, but that's the beauty of it. A lot of these perennials will just continue to spread, and sometimes not in any kind of crazy fashion. Some of them are a bit better at spreading than others. Now this is a helenium, and this is part of the mariachi series. So this is a cultivar called Bandera, and it has a like red florets around a bright yellow disc. And I love, it's commonly called sneezeweed, and I love the native species. The native species are quite wonderful, also really good for our pollinators, but they're really tall. I mean, they are like 4 or 5 feet tall. I mean, sometimes in a good breeze or a strong wind or rain, they'll start to tip over, and you'll have to stake them up if you don't want them kind of leaning on their neighbors. But this one actually happens to not grow that tall, and there's a number of heleniums in the mariachi series that have really cool color patterns and whatnot. So this one is, like I said, is a bit red and grows much shorter, and it will give me that kind of disc floret that maybe some of our pollinators are looking for. and I'll plant that here on the side. And yet I have a couple more plants, but I think I'm going to use them in another planter. But the one that I am going to try to fit in here is I think this is one of our thymes. It might be our citrus thyme, or a lemon thyme. This is our thymus, and there's lots of different cultivars. I did an episode on thyme that I'm planting in between paving stones versus ones that I've been planting in some of my herb gardens or other culinary gardens, or my pollinator plants. Some of them grow a little higher than others. Right now, the ones in the paving stones are blooming, so it's pretty cool because a lot of pollinators will go in between the paving stones and pollinate those plants. And so I think like having one of these out here, and if I don't want to go off my deck and I'm cooking and I need some time, I could maybe clip a few leaves here. No big deal. So I'm just gonna plant this one in here. I might be able to plant a second one as well. Oh my gosh, there's very little space that I'm going to have to put soil here. Yeah, I could plant one more time. Now, I'm not sure if these have already flowered yet. The different cultivars of thyme flower at different periods of time. Oh, right, this is at capacity here, I think. So this is a full-on pollinator and perennial plant palette right here. That's a lot of alliteration. All right, so I'm gonna move some of these aside. I have a identical Corten steel planter on the other side, and I'm not going to show how I plant that one because I'm gonna plant it the same way. And I'm just gonna fill in some of the edges here again with just like my Espoma organic potting medium. You could use whatever your heart's content, but I don't really have that much space because these plants are taking up the space. I'll say that if you don't have a lot of garden space and you want to be able to attract pollinators, this is a really good way to do it, just planting in containers. And even if you have a lot of garden space, this is a way to draw pollinators in closer to where you are. So you'll be surprised. You might just be sitting on your deck and then all of a sudden a hummingbird is going to fly right by. And it's just like, what a wonderful experience. All right, I'm gonna water this in. And I might have to come out here if we have dry days. I might have to come out here and water this. The Liatris spicata and the Bigeloia and Nymphophia and even the Crocosmia, the thyme, they're pretty much, and even the Asclepias, they're pretty much drought tolerant, which is really good if you're not out here watering or you don't have rainy weather. But I've found that in containers they could dry out even a bit more, and even these drought tolerant plants will want a good drink of water. All right, that looks great for now. This is our little perennial pollinator palette garden right here, just in our containers right outside the door. And as I shared, I'm gonna plant the second one on the other side, on the west side of the house, just as I've planted this one. I saved the best plants for this side because this is the one that people often walk up to, and the other side, the plants are a little bit smaller and they won't get as much sun either, so they'll probably continue to stay smaller. But love the way this looks. I'm really excited for this planter this year because I'm sure I'm going to be sat out here like with my little matcha and just enjoying some morning rays with some of the pollinators, like some of the butterflies that are coming out now. A lot of tiger swallowtails and also our hummingbirds are out here in full force as well. So thank you so much for joining me on this planting, and I will be back with more great stuff in our gardens because there's so much going on. And even though we've hit summer, we are still planting away in the gardens and doing a lot of weeding and whatnot. So stay tuned here and I'll see you later. Bye.
We'll be sharing how the gardens and wildscaped areas mature as the seasons progress, so if you enjoy videos like this, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notifications button to help us grow and share these videos to more folks. In the meantime, we'll be cracking away at more of the gardens and renovations here at Flock. We'll see you in the next video.